All right, so you're going to these services. You're not terribly sure why. We're maybe invoking someone, but
Right.
still thinking about higher awareness. All right, so what happened over the course of these 3 months? How did your opinion change one way or the other?
So I started to certainly sense that the spiritual side mattered more. It did start to open me up, and I was inspired to pursue some of these things more as well. There were lots of stories about just very rigorous Zen masters who endured all sorts of difficulties in order to rise to higher states of awareness and things like that. I was pretty inspired by those stories.
Yeah.
I thought that they were really interesting, the ascetical mortifications that they would do. At the same time, I thought that Zen was a little weird in two things. First, they were trying really hard to be Japanese, it seemed to me. They did a lot of the chants in Japanese, and they had a lot of Japanese customs. They had a lot of Japanese art, which seemed to depict spiritual things like maras, which are their version of spirits, and a lot of them, frankly, looked pretty demonic. So I started to think that maybe there was more to it than that. That there was really a sense of a deity. A lot of this was from Japanese Shintoism, mind you. But those things just heavily influenced the Zen religion because they were in a Shinto culture. Also, even though I admired the rigor of it, and I did start to sense that it gave me more sort of self-mastery over my mind, there were problems within what to do with these experiences that I was becoming more conscious of. It started to turn me on to one of the major problems with just focusing on awareness. Consciousness is a just vague, amorphous term. That's the center of the religion. That's what everyone talked about. But I never really understood what it was during these first few times that I was, these first few serious endeavors into it. So it was usually presented without much explanation, and then with a lot of sort of vague, mysterious hand waves of, oh, this is consciousness. It's great. Cultivate more of it. And it was usually said in a very mysterious, low voice that was kind of weird. So I started to try and figure that out, but I realized that I was becoming more conscious of a lot of feelings and difficulties. I'd just gotten out of the army, so I was adjusting to life in the civilian world. But that consciousness didn't really tell me what to do with all of these different feelings and emotions and things like that were coming up and different life difficulties and trials.
One of the things you pointed out earlier is that as you were engaging in yoga, you noticed some positive things happening, but you also said some quirky. What does that mean? I think you used the word quirky.
Yeah.
Or strange.
There certainly were some quirky things, and it was things like the Mara statues in the Japanese monastery. And I also just felt weird movements in my soul that I didn't know exactly what they were talking about, what was going on.
What does that mean, weird movements in your soul?
Weird feelings and weird, nothing that was that off the wall. I mean, I was able to keep myself really grounded, largely thanks to, I think, some of my physics training and just my general common sense that I gleaned from the military. But they're certainly trying to open you up to a lot of things. They say just to open, and there was constant talk of opening your heart and opening to different feelings, especially in the yoga world, not as much in the Zen. But some of those things I just didn't understand what they were and why I was opening myself up to these things.
Is Zen Buddhism always associated with yoga? I wasn't aware of this. So at the monastery, you're saying you're going through yoga every day.
Yeah.
Is that common in Buddhism?
Buddhism originally comes from yoga. The Buddha was originally a yogi.
What?
Yeah. Back in about 2500 BC,
Right.
the Buddha went off and spent a lot of time with some extreme ascetical yogis.
This is blowing my mind. Like I knew the Buddha, if we can call him that, was from India, and he was a Hindu at the time. Is that correct or no?
He was a Hindu.
Right.
And he was a very well-to-do one. He
Yeah.
was in a palace, if I remember correctly. He had a marriage to a very prominent and beautiful
I looked
princess.
into it a little bit myself. There was like a similarity to St. Francis in a sense, that he encountered poverty and then kind of got rid of his wealth. And, well, you could tell this story better than me. I'm sorry.
No, that's absolutely accurate. And that is, to his credit in some respect, and he was really willing to sacrifice his worldly position to try and seek some kind of truth. And then he went really in depth into some of these extreme yoga ascetical traditions, but was turned off by them. And so he veered more towards the middle path, which isn't so extreme in its asceticism as the yogic path that he was doing. And he developed a few different doctrines. So one of the main ones, for example, is that Buddhism doesn't believe in the soul, actually. So it doesn't believe that you have an individual identity. It has the doctrine of non-self. Versus yoga believes in a soul. Buddhism says that you are supposed to just realize your own impersonal awareness, which is what you really are, which is the formless ground of all eternity, the divine emptiness. You're supposed to completely empty yourself of yourself. Whereas yoga, you're supposed to grow yourself, empower yourself, and then realize that yourself is actually the divine.
Okay, so how do they reconcile this in a Zen Buddhist monastery where they're practicing yoga? Does it depend on the monastery?
That's a good question. And there's been a lot of different changes and evolution on this over the centuries, and even in recent times. We were practicing yoga in the monastery, mostly because of this guy, Jumpo Dennis Kelly Roshi. He realized that the Zen Buddhist...
Super cool name, by the way. If you're going to be a yogi or a whatever, that's a great name. Matt Fradd, not a good yogi teacher name.
No, yeah.
Like that lady you were saying, last name was Forrest. Forrest Yoga. That sounds good. It's got a good ring to it. Fradd Yoga, they would never take off.
They are very clever marketers, yes. I don't think Alex Frank Yoga would take off on there. It sounds too frank.
Nice.
Thank you so much for watching that clip. If you enjoyed it, do us a favor by clicking like and subscribe. And if you really liked it, consider sharing. Thanks.